The Mirrorbind Pact, Part 2. Chapter 16, The Bloodbound Temple. The wood swallowed her before the Thorkeepers could. Lys ran. Not blindly, but with direction written into her bones. The moment the mirror shard flared and Kaelin's voice whispered, "Run," something old inside her woke. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. A memory not fully hers, something from blood, not thought. The trees blurred past her, frost still clinging to bark from the unnatural cold that had crept into the world since the second chain vanished. She didn't need a map. Her blood was the map. The mark on her shoulder glowed steadily, its pulse guiding her north, through forgotten paths that no longer existed on any chart. She moved through places where the air shimmered, where birds did not sing and the moon shone too brightly between ancient boughs. Something was waiting ahead. She didn't know what, but she knew its name. The Bloodbound Temple. Kaelin had never spoken of it directly, but the journal she'd stolen from the Thorkeeper library had. Hidden in plain sight, bound in plain brown leather, it had been shelved between two tomes on magical geometry. On its last page, a single line. The first pact was not made in halls of glass, but beneath the temple where the blood still sings. She found it at dawn. A clearing of scorched earth and pale roots, ringed by trees that had grown around the ruins like a cage. The temple had no spires, no banners, no symbols above its gate. It rose from the earth like it had been pushed out, massive black stone, smooth and cold, its edges too clean to be carved by human hands. The stairs leading down into its mouth were cracked but intact, etched with runes that flickered faintly when Lys approached. Her mark pulsed in response. The temple recognized her. The air inside was thick and unmoving. Old, not stale, but preserved, like it had not been breathed in centuries. The silence was absolute. Even her heartbeat sounded like an intrusion. Torches flared as she passed. Not with fire, but with silver blue light that didn't flicker. Cold, but illuminating. The stone walls bore carvings, 7 sigils surrounding an 8th that had been scratched out, then burned away completely. She traced her fingers over the destroyed symbol. Velisara. This was where they had made the pact. This was where they had erased her. She descended further. The stairs seemed endless, spiraling down and down until the air became so thick it pressed against her skin. Then, suddenly, they ended. A massive chamber opened before her. It was circular, impossibly wide. Mirrors lined the walls, tall as towers, fogged with age, veiled in cracked obsidian. And at the center, an altar. Low, wide, made of black glass. Stained. Lys stepped forward, the silence like a heartbeat in her ears. The altar called to her. Not with voice. With weight. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface, and the world convulsed. A flash. A scream. The past poured into her mind like a flood. 7 figures around this very altar, hands bleeding, mirrors flickering as Kaelin knelt in the center, his form radiant and raw. They bound him. With words. With magic. With blood. And then, one of them stepped back. Velisara. The only one who hesitated. The only one who turned away before the pact sealed. Lys staggered. The memory faded. But something else remained. A voice. Low. Rumbling. Older than Kaelin. Older than even the pact. "You have come far, child of reflection." She turned. Behind her, something rose from the shadows. A figure, not Kaelin, not a Thorkeeper, taller than human, robed in midnight, his face hidden beneath a mirror of shifting shadow. His body flickered, like he existed halfway in the world, his voice vibrating through the stone. "You are not the first to seek to break the pact. But you may be the last." Lys backed away slowly. "Who are you?" The figure inclined his head. "I am the first mirror. The one they broke to shape the chains. Kaelin was my echo. You are my reflection." Her stomach twisted. "Are you here to stop me?" "No. I am here to warn you." He gestured to the altar. The pact was not just a prison. It was a lock. And behind it is not just Kaelin. It is the mirror world itself. All that was forgotten. All that refused to be remembered. If the chains break, it does not just free him. It frees us. Lys swallowed hard. "So why help me?" "Because if you do not break the chains, the pact will break you. It is unraveling already. You feel it. The dreams. The reflections that do not follow. The watchers behind glass. That is the splintering." He stepped closer. "Break the 3rd chain, and you will no longer be able to stay in this world." "What happens to me?" she whispered. The first mirror tilted his head. You begin to remember what you were, what they took from you, what they made Kalen forget. And once you remember, he reached out and placed a shard of ancient mirror in her hand. It pulsed with heat, with promise, with power. You will no longer ask who you are. You will ask what you're willing to become. The chamber pulsed, and behind her, the altar cracked. One long fracture, glowing gold. The third chain had begun to split, and this time she had started it. Chapter 17, Mirror Walker. The mirror shard burned through her glove before she even left the temple. Liz didn't scream, but she dropped it. The sliver of ancient glass struck the obsidian floor with a sound like splintering ice, then hovered mid-air, suspended in a shimmer of silver light. The glow spread in a slow pulse, bleeding into the stone, crawling toward her boots like a tide. It didn't scorch or harm, it unlocked. Runes long dead flared to life on the floor around her in a circular pattern, one she instinctively recognized though she had never seen it before. She stepped back. The pulse followed. Something in the mirror shard had chosen her, not as a bearer, not just as a link in the chain, but as a pathway. The first mirror watched from the shadows, his form flickering, words still echoing in her mind. You will ask what you're willing to become. Liz didn't want to become anything. She just wanted answers. But answers, like magic, always came with a price. When the third chain cracked, she felt it. Not as a sound, but as a pressure deep behind her ribs. It wasn't pain. It was openness, like a door she hadn't realized was locked inside her had finally begun to move. She reached for the mirror shard again. This time, it didn't burn. It hummed. And when she blinked, she was gone. Not vanished. Not scattered. Shifted. The world twisted sideways. The temple faded like smoke. Light bent, shadows sharpened. And Liz found herself standing in a perfect copy of the same chamber, but reversed. Inverted. The colors dull and deep. The air colder. Every sound muffled. The mirror world. She had crossed the boundary. Without Kalen. Without guidance. Without ritual. Her heartbeat roared in her ears as she turned in a slow circle, confirming what she already knew. Nothing moved here the way it should. Time dragged. Her breath left trails like smoke. The mirrors on the walls were not veiled. Instead, they showed images. Not reflections. Moments. She stepped closer to one. It showed her at the House of Thorns, sleeping, curled on her side. A watcher, a Thorkeeper, stood over her bed. Not protecting. Studying. Another mirror showed Kalen, shackled in silver chains inside a chamber of fire. But his eyes looked right at her, as though he knew she was watching from another place. And then she saw herself. Not a reflection. Another. This Liz was older. Hardened. Wearing armor that shimmered like mirror steel. Her eyes no longer gold, but black with veins of light. She stood on a battlefield surrounded by shattered sigils, broken thrones, and blood. A crown floated above her palm. Liz stepped away from the mirror, heart pounding. What is this place? She whispered. The answer came not in words, but in feeling. The mirror world was not just a realm. It was memory, possibility, regret, fear. All the things people had cast aside when they created the pact. The prison wasn't built to contain only Kalen. It was built to contain truth. She wandered the temple's reflection, unsure how long she walked before she came to the chamber that didn't exist in the real world. A room filled with suspended shards, hundreds of them, each one humming with a name. Edda, the innkeeper who vanished. Her name glowed bright. Others she didn't know. And one, still dark, marked Liz. She stepped toward it, trembling. But before her fingers could touch it, something moved. Not a ripple. Not a voice. A shape. It detached from the far wall, stepping into view, a tall, hooded figure draped in black robes of glass-threaded cloth, no face visible beneath the cowl, but silver chains dripping from its sleeves. It didn't speak, but the air twisted around it. Mirrors trembled. The thing had followed her. From the other side. Or it had always been here, waiting. Liz stepped back. The figure stepped forward. And when it raised a hand, every mirror in the room cracked slightly. She ran. Through corridors that bent wrong, past echoes of herself she didn't want to understand, through stairwells where the walls whispered her name in voices that sounded like her mother's. The figure followed without sound. The shard in her hand pulsed harder. She had to leave. She turned toward a tall mirror that shimmered like water and willed it, open. And it did. She threw herself through the glass, light swallowing her, and landed on cold stone, back in the real world. Alone. The mirror behind her shattered, and the piece in her hand? Gone. But something had come with her. A presence. Not Kaelin. Not the first mirror. Something else. Something watching her now, not from glass, but from inside. The third chain was broken, and the mirror walker had returned. But she had not come back alone. Chapter 18. The Binding Ceremony. Liz didn't remember falling asleep. After returning from the mirror world, her body collapsed. The moment she touched the ground, her knees gave out and the world tilted sideways, the pressure in her chest too much, the noise of mirrors too loud. Her mind was filled with too many things, visions that didn't belong to her, memories that hadn't happened yet, voices calling her name in tones that weren't human. The mirror world had not just shown her truth, it had left its mark. When she opened her eyes again, the sky was crimson. Not from dusk. From wards, thick, blood-red symbols pulsing overhead like a dome. She was no longer in the temple ruins. She was no longer anywhere natural. Stone walls surrounded her, carved with sharp runes that shimmered like embers. A circle of thrones, 7, rose around her in a half-moon. On each sat a figure cloaked in different colors: green, gold, white, crimson, midnight blue, umber, and gray. Faces veiled, power seeping from them like fog. And in the center of it all, her. Bound. Not in chains, but in light. Ribbons of glowing glyphs wrapped around her wrists, her ankles, her throat. They pulsed in rhythm with her breath, and the more she struggled, the tighter they drew. Where she tried to speak, but the glyphs across her throat flashed, and her voice vanished. The voice came from the throne robed in gray. "You are in the sanctum of accord," the figure said. "The sacred chamber where the pact was first forged and once more protected. You've broken 3 chains," said the one in crimson. "The pact has weakened. The mirror world bleeds into this one. The balance is tipping," said the figure in white. "You were never meant to bear the mark. You were meant to bind it," said the one in blue. The figure in gold rose slowly. A woman, her presence colder than snowmelt. "But you were hidden, raised outside the bloodline, outside the right. And now we must reclaim what was stolen." Lys's heart pounded. These were not the Thor Keepers. These were higher, older. The pact blooded themselves. She recognized it now. The power wasn't magic. It was legacy. These were the descendants of the 7 bloodlines. The ones who had originally sealed the Mirrorbind. And now they'd come to seal her. The gray-cloaked speaker stepped forward and raised an obsidian blade etched with silver script. "The binding ceremony," he intoned, "is not a punishment. It is a restoration." One of the others stood. The blue-robed figure. "The chains are not meant to break. But if they must, their power must not fall into chaos. It must be contained. Within you." Lys fought the bindings. The glyphs glowed brighter, her mark pulsing in rhythm, but she couldn't draw breath. Couldn't move. She had no shard. No spell. Nothing but herself. A hand touched her forehead. The words began. The binding rite. 7 voices, speaking in unison. Runes circled the chamber, flaring white, then red, then gold. Her vision blurred. Symbols crawled across her skin, writing over her mark. "Velisara, forgotten blood, mirror-born flame, we bind thee to silence, to control, to memory no longer your own." She screamed, but no sound came. The blade in the speaker's hand descended toward her chest. And then, the light cracked. A scream tore through the chamber, not hers. One of the thrones shattered. The figure in umber dissolved into ash. A figure stepped from the shadows behind the circle, silver eyes burning, robes coiled with magic. Kaelin. But not like before. Half of him was real. His left arm shimmered with true form, no longer bound by light. The other half still rippled with reflection, but the chains that had once dragged behind him? Gone. He raised a hand, and every mirror in the chamber shattered outward. The glyphs binding Lys flickered, broke, vanished. She collapsed, gasping for air. "You will not bind her," Kaelin growled, his voice filled with fury and cold. "She is not your lock." The figure in gray lunged, blade drawn. Kaelin caught him mid-air and snapped his sigil with a touch. The chamber exploded in light. Lys reached out, found Kaelin's hand, gripped it, and the 2 of them vanished in a storm of silver fire. They reappeared in the ruins of the first temple, breathless, bruised. Lys stared at him. "You're whole," He looked down at his arms, solid, real. Partially. Why did you come? She asked. Kaelin turned to her, and for once, the arrogance fell away. What remained was something raw. Because they were about to take the last part of you that was still yours. He took her hand. And I would rather shatter the world than let them rewrite you. Chapter 19. The Unseen Throne. The storm hadn't followed them, but its echo had. Even as Lys and Kaelin stood in the ruins of the first temple, breath-heaving, the shattered remnants of the binding ceremony still clung to them. Sigils faded slowly from her arms, as if reluctant to release their grip. Kaelin's skin shimmered between solid flesh and mirrored flicker, his jaw clenched with effort, his form held together by sheer will. They didn't speak at first. The silence was a balm. The temple pulsed faintly beneath their feet. Not with light, but with memory, an ancient thrum that called to Lys like a second heartbeat. She turned in a slow circle, her fingers brushing the cracked altar, the runes now glowing faintly in her presence. The chains within her had shifted. She could feel it. 3 broken, for still bound, but all awake now. And the third hadn't just cracked. It had chosen her. Why did they call it a restoration? She asked softly, breaking the silence. That wasn't a restoration. That was theft. Kaelin turned to her, his silver eyes darker than usual. Because that's what the pact always was. A theft. Of freedom. Of memory. Of truth. He stepped closer, the light from his body casting strange shadows across the ruined chamber. You asked me once why you, he said. Why the pact reacts to you. Why the mirror world responds. Why the chains tremble when you breathe. She nodded, slow and cautious. Kaelin gestured to the altar. Because you were not just Velisara reborn. You were the one they tried to erase twice. He reached into his coat, drawing out a small object, flat, black, and smooth. A shard of obsidian so polished it reflected nothing. He placed it on the altar. It pulsed. The air shifted. The room around them began to unfold. Walls rippled, melting into scenes, not illusions, not memories, but echoes. Visions of a place neither in the real world nor the mirror world. A great throne room carved from black glass and starlight, suspended in an endless void. 7 thrones stood in a circle empty. And at the center, a dais where no throne stood. Just an absence. A void shaped like a seat. The unseen throne, Kaelin said, his voice hushed. Lys stared. There was an 8th. Yes, he whispered. A throne that wasn't built from stone or rule. A throne meant to bind the others together. Not with power. With memory. It wasn't a throne for ruling. It was a throne for remembering. For truth. He turned to her. And it was yours. Lys's knees nearly buckled. What? You were meant to take that throne. Long ago. Before the pact. Before the bloodlines turned on each other. Before they made me their prisoner. Velisara was the first to understand what the mirror world truly was, not a realm of chaos, but a realm of potential. She built the throne not to wield it, but to anchor it. He stepped closer. And then they erased you. Erased her. Hid your bloodline. Because they realized that whoever sat on that throne would remember every lie they'd ever told. Every truth they'd buried. Every chain they forged not to protect the world, but to protect themselves. The vision flickered. In it, Lys saw a woman, herself, but older. Cloaked in silver and black. Standing before the empty dais, arms outstretched. Power flowing from her palms into the thrones. The others watching her, uncertain. Frightened. And then, they struck. 7 blades and 7 backs. 7 betrayals. And the throne faded into nothing. Lys stumbled back, breaking the vision. The chamber returned. She was shaking. But I'm not her, she whispered. I'm not Velisara. I don't know how to. You're not her, Kaelin said softly. But you carry her will. Her blood. Her choice. And that is what the throne recognizes. She looked at him. Why are you helping me? Kaelin's eyes met hers, and for once, no mask, no mystery. Because I remember what it was like to stand beside her, he said. Before they turned me into a weapon. Before they chained my name to a prison. I wasn't made to rule, Lys. I was made to guard. And I failed. His voice broke on the last word. I failed her. Lys stepped forward, heart pounding. You didn't fail her, she said. She gave you her trust. Just like I'm choosing to give you mine. The runes in the altar flared. The obsidian shard floated between them, pulsing faster. Kaelin reached out. She took his hand. And the shard shattered into 1,000 threads of light, each one flying to a different point in the air, forming a constellation. A map. 7 stars. And one dark void in the center. The unseen throne was not gone. It was waiting. Chapter 20. Reflections of Power. The stars did not fade when the shard shattered. They hovered, suspended in the air like molten light, humming with ancient rhythm, forming a perfect constellation around the altar where the throne had once stood. Each one pulsed softly, a heartbeat in starlight, and Liz could feel them, not just see them, feel them flickering behind her eyes, along her spine, inside her bones. 7 stars. 7 truths. And the void in the center, still unlit. Still waiting. She reached toward the nearest one on instinct, and the moment her fingers brushed its glow, a memory exploded across her senses. Not hers, but real. A battlefield lit in violet flame, thrones shattered, pact bearers screaming, each voice layered over another in a desperate cacophony. She saw her own face, older, determined, eyes filled with grief, and she was leading them, not following, holding a broken blade in one hand and a mirror sigil burning on her palm. The vision shattered. Liz stumbled back, heart racing. Her hand trembled. What was that? She gasped. Kaelin stood beside her, watching with something close to reverence and sorrow. Memory magic, he said. Mirror magic. The rarest kind. It doesn't just reflect what is, it reflects what was, what could be, what will be, and sometimes, what never should have been. Liz stared at the constellation. These aren't just stars. No, he said. They're anchors. Each tied to a truth buried by the pact. Each one was sealed when your throne was erased. She turned toward him. And now they're opening because I remembered. Kaelin nodded. Because you chose to remember. A tremor rippled through the temple floor. Faint, but undeniable. The world was responding. Somewhere far off, the chain still bound to the pact stirred, perhaps shivering under the weight of memory reawakening. The third chain was broken. The fourth would feel it soon. And now, so would the others. Liz approached the constellation again, slower this time. She reached her hand not to touch, but to listen. The light curled toward her fingers. One star pulsed brighter, and a circle of glass formed beneath her feet, swirling into a mirror-like surface. It rippled outward in concentric rings, casting reflections of the stars above. She gasped as her own image flickered across it, dozens of versions of herself layered over one another. Younger, older, regal, wild-eyed, armored, bloodstained, crowned. All of them possible. All of them hers. One step forward from the mirror's surface. Liz didn't move. The figure, herself, but clothed in midnight with a halo of silver flame, raised a hand. And in a voice like hers, yet deeper, she spoke. You are the bearer of truth. The one who was not made to obey. You are the splinter in their control. The reflection they feared. The mirrorless pressed her hand to the surface. Liz did the same. They met. And magic erupted. It wasn't a search. It was a remembering. Light flooded her mind. Runes she'd never studied unfurled behind her eyes. The architecture of ancient spells settled into her bones. She understood things, not because she'd learned them, but because she had always known them, somewhere in the bloodline buried beneath silence. Her hands lifted, unbidden, and the world obeyed. The mirror beneath her cracked and reformed into an array of glowing sigils. The air shimmered, folding inwards. Reflections bent, twisted, rearranged themselves. The stars spun in a slow dance above her head. Kaelin took a cautious step back. You've touched it, he said. The reflection of power. Liz looked at her hands. They burned with light. But it didn't hurt. It fit. This is what Velisara was, she whispered. This is what they tried to erase. Kaelin nodded once. You're remembering too fast. I don't care. You should, he said. Because the world won't survive you at full memory unless it chooses to change with you. The chamber rumbled again. A mirror on the far wall shattered. Another cracked. Reality was beginning to bend. Reflections were no longer bound to surfaces. They danced along the air, appeared on Kaelin's robes, shimmered across Liz's eyes. And in one of them, she saw someone watching her. Not Kaelin. Not her other selves. A man. Hooded in deep shadow, wrapped in chains of darkness and light. Eyes like eclipsed suns. A symbol burned into his chest, the fourth sigil. The Crownless. He tilted his head toward her. And smiled. The vision faded. Liz stumbled back from the mirror circle, panting, the stars pulsing faster now. He knows, she whispered. Kaelin's expression tightened. He's waiting for you to unlock the fourth. Why? Because the fourth chain doesn't bind me. Lys stared at him. Then who? Kalen's gaze darkened. It binds him. The stars above dimmed slightly, like they had heard and feared what was just spoken. The fourth chain wasn't a lock on the prison. It was a lock on the Crownless. And if it broke, something worse than Kalen might step into the light. Chapter 21. The Chain Beneath the Mask. They traveled in silence for days. Lys and Kalen left the shattered temple under starlight, not by roads, but through mirror paths, fractures in the air only visible to those who carried the Pact's mark. Each step through one rippling portal took them miles across the known world, bypassing cities and strongholds in the desperate eyes of the Pact's dying custodians. But the distance did not matter, because the fourth chain called to her. It sang in her dreams now, low and slow, a melody of change dragging over stone, a whisper with no language, just need. And always, within that echo, a voice she'd never heard aloud, but knew with marrow-deep certainty. His voice. The Crownless. She didn't speak his name. Even Kalen wouldn't. He only called him the Lost One, the Fourth Bound, or the one they locked too late. Lys didn't ask questions, because the fear in Kalen's voice when he spoke of the fourth chain was worse than any answer she could imagine. Eventually, the path stopped opening. Kalen frowned. He's bending the mirror paths now, drawing you off the lines. That means we're close. They walked the rest of the way through blackened forest, trees leaning unnaturally toward one another, the bark carved with runes long since outlawed. The wind was wrong. It didn't blow, it circled, like breath exhaled from deep underground. And the sky above? Veiled in a sheet of red-gray cloud, glowing with no sun. The sanctum of the fourth chain was buried beneath a valley no map dared mark. And it didn't appear until Lys bled. A thorn caught her hand as they passed an ancient tree, and a single drop of blood fell onto the soil. The earth opened like a wound, revealing stone stairs spiraling downward. Kalen caught her arm. If you step inside, he said, you walk alone. I've walked alone before. Not like this, he said quietly. Not with him. She met his eyes. Then pull me out if I fall. He didn't nod. He just let go. Lys descended. Each step she took down into the sanctum echoed, not just through stone, but through her. With every footfall, memories that weren't hers began to surface, visions of war councils, of thrones torn asunder, of a voice whispering in her mind like silk sliding over glass. You came to break the fourth chain. But the chain is not yours to break. It is yours to wear. The sanctum opened slowly, a spiral into a vast cathedral carved from obsidian and root. Mirrors floated in the air, cracked and spinning, their reflections showing different moments of her life, but warped. In some, she was a tyrant. In others, a ghost. In one, she ruled from a mirror throne as Kalen knelt before her in chains. And at the center of it all, him. The Crownless. He stood in the middle of a perfect circle, mirrors orbiting him like slow moons, their light reflecting off chains that shimmered and hissed. His face was half hidden beneath a porcelain mask, cracked, flaked, and inlaid with gold. Only his mouth visible. Pale lips curved in an almost smile. His robes moved like shadow-made flesh. And his eyes, what little she could see behind the mask, were eclipses. Black suns with rings of smoldering fire. He didn't speak at first. He just watched her approach. Lys tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. The chain at her shoulder, the mark of the pact, burned softly. Then he moved. Not fast. Not threatening. Just gracefully. As if the world bent at his pace. You are brighter than I expected, he said at last, voice low and velvety. They said Velisara's air would be wild. Untamed. But I see discipline in you. Thought. Pain. He tilted his head. Pain makes the best vessels. Lys straightened her back. I'm not a vessel. No, he agreed. You're a mirror. But mirrors are meant to hold things. To carry truths no one else will. She stepped into the circle. What truth are you trying to carry? He smiled. And the mirror stilled. The truth that you don't need to break the fourth chain, he said, lifting his hand slowly. You only need to inherit it. He closed his fingers, and the mirrors behind him merged into one. It reflected not him, not her, but a version of them together. Standing on the ruins of the pact. All chains broken. The mirror world and the waking world fused. She stood at the center in a crown of mirrored glass. And he knelt, not as servant, but as consort. As equal. You're not trying to stop me, she said slowly. No, he said. I'm trying to join you. He stepped closer. I have waited so long for someone to reach me. To not fear what I am. I was the last to be chained, because I was the only one who understood what freedom would cost. She narrowed her eyes. And what does it cost? His voice dropped to a whisper. Your soul. Your memory. Your crown. Liz stepped back. But the fourth chain, unseen until now, flared to life around her wrist. Not a binding. A bond. The Crownless lifted his hand. And it matched hers. Break it, he said, voice low and coaxing. Let me be whole. Let us be whole. And I will give you everything they stole. Everything they feared you would become. Liz looked down at the chain. It shimmered. Pulsed. Waited. She reached for it, heart-pounding fingers trembling. But just before she touched it, she heard Kalen's voice. Not in the chamber. In her mind. You don't need him, Liz. You are already complete. You were born whole. You were only made to forget it. Her breath caught. She looked at the Crownless. And she saw it. Not power. Not promise. Hunger. She turned her hand and burned the chain herself. It snapped with a scream that wasn't hers. The Crownless staggered. His mask cracked. And Liz fled the sanctum before the mirrors turned red. Behind her, the fourth chain died. But the Crownless remembered. Chapter 22. What was erased? The fourth chain did not simply break. It shattered reality. Liz felt it as she sprinted out of the sanctum, every footfall echoing with the weight of something undone. The moment the Crownless mask cracked, the world shifted, not just around her, but within. Magic curled under her skin like fire seeking air. The mark on her shoulder surged, pulsing in rhythm with an old, long-buried heartbeat. Her own. The mirror world flickered at the edges of her sight as if it no longer needed permission to bleed through. Trees mirrored their own reflections in places where no water flowed. Shadows whispered her name. Stone remembered footsteps she hadn't taken yet. By the time she collapsed in the forest beyond the valley, her body felt like glass vibrating on the verge of shattering. Kalen was there before she could call out, kneeling beside her with his hand at her back, steadying her as the fourth chain's unraveling surged through her veins like liquid lightning. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Because she spoke. Not Liz. But someone through her. Her mouth opened, and a voice, ageless and vast, spilled forth, shaped from memory and mirror light. They thought breaking me would end the truth. They thought forgetting would make them free. But truth is a flame that sleeps beneath the ice. And now it burns again. Kalen's eyes widened. He reached for her face, gripping her chin gently. Velisara, he whispered. But Liz blinked, and she was no longer in the forest. She stood inside a memory. Her own. And not her own. It was the moment the pact was born. She was Velisara. Standing in a circle of mirror thrones, blood on her hands, 7 others watching her with fear and resolve. She had tried to stop it, tried to convince them that binding Kalen would not save the world, only silence it. But they hadn't listened. The magic they were forging was too potent, too frightening. They didn't want to understand the mirror world. They wanted to control it. Velisara was the only one who refused to sign. And so they erased her. Not with blade, but with binding. They carved her name from the pact itself, twisted her bloodline into shadow, stripped her memories into mirror shards and scattered them across the sanctums. And worst of all, they used Kalen to do it. Not of his own will, but by turning his reflection against himself. She saw it now. She remembered it. She was it. The pain, the fury, the betrayal so vast it cracked the glass between worlds. When Liz came back to herself, her body was shaking. Her hands were bleeding, her fingernails embedded in her palms from clenching too hard. Her eyes streamed with tears she hadn't felt. Kalen sat before her, not speaking. Waiting. You didn't betray her, she whispered. They made you. He didn't nod. Didn't smile. He only said, I was the chain that bound you. That's why I fought to wake you. She crawled closer, took his hand. You were the only one who remembered. And then the sky above them cracked open with a sound like the earth itself exhaling. Not with light. With memory. Thousands of mirror shards burst into the air, suspended high above the forest canopy, each glowing with an echo of something lost. Names. Faces. Places that had never existed until now. Because the fourth chain hadn't just sealed the Crownless. It had sealed her truth. Velisara's memories. Her magic. Her throne. And now that the fourth seal was broken, Liz remembered everything. The mirrors descended slowly, spinning in wide arcs above the trees. Some began to settle in the air like stars. Others disappeared into the soil, into roots, into stone. Magic was returning to the world in the form of truths once erased. Kalen rose to his feet. "They'll feel this," he said. "All of them. The Pact Bloods. The Seelie Courts. The Thor Keepers. The Crownless himself." Liz stood beside him. Taller, now. Not in body, but in presence. "They tried to steal what I was," she said, voice steadier than ever. "But I am not here to take back what was mine." She raised her hand. Mirror light swirled in her palm. "I'm here to burn the lie they built on my name." And as her voice carried into the rising wind, the fifth chain trembled in the deep and woke. Chapter 23, Thrones of Smoke and Salt. The message arrived on wings of glass. 3 days after the fourth chain shattered, the world felt different, warmer where it should be cold, silent in places once full of wind. Magic no longer whispered. It sang. Rivers shimmered at night. The trees in the deep woods bowed slightly when Liz passed. Her very presence rippled through the natural world like a forgotten frequency returning to its pitch. The pact had cracked, and the old powers had noticed. They did not send armies. They sent an invitation. It arrived by Mirror Hawk, its wings etched with living runes, its feathers as sharp as obsidian. When it landed before Liz and Kalen, it did not caw or blink. It bowed. The scroll tied to its leg unraveled midair and read itself aloud in a voice like velvet sliding over blades. "To the mirror-born heir of Velisara, you were summoned by decree of the Twin Thrones. Seelie and Unseelie, keepers of the world beneath roots and stars. Attend at the court between. Come unbound. Come alone. Come swiftly. Your awakening is no longer a rumor. It is a reckoning." The hawk dissolved into shards. Liz looked at Kalen. "A trap." "Absolutely," he said. "And also, the only chance you'll get to speak to them before they choose which side to burn." So she went. She wore no armor. No weapons. Only the long black coat stitched with old Velisaran sigils she had found among the relics, and the mark on her shoulder, now fully aglow, no longer hiding itself, no longer afraid to be seen. Kalen did not come. The courts had insisted she come alone. But he gave her one thing before she left. A sliver of true mirror. Not enchanted. Not magical. Just real. "In case you forget what you are," he said. The court between was neither land nor sky. It existed in a fold of space where sun and moon touched but did not blend. A vast hall suspended in air, its walls made of salt and smoke. The floor was mirror water, still and perfect, reflecting the sky above and far below. 2 thrones faced one another across a bridge of light. The Seelie Queen sat in robes of woven sunlight, her golden hair floating as if underwater, her crown made of petals that shimmered with starlight. The Unseelie King lounged across from her, cloaked in midnight smoke, crowned with bones wrapped in silver thorns, his skin ink-dark, eyes pale as frost. They did not rise when Liz entered. They only watched, and the wind itself bent around them. She stood between their thrones, unbent, uncrowned, unbroken. "You wear her magic," said the Seelie Queen, her voice like wine through crystal chimes. "But you are not her." "No," said the Unseelie King, his voice a deep growl. "You are more dangerous." "Because you remember." "I didn't ask to," Liz replied evenly. "That is the problem with memory," said the Queen. "It wakes when it's needed, not when it's wanted." The King leaned forward. "You've broken 4 chains." "Yes." "You've stirred the Crownless." "Yes." "You plan to break the rest." Liz didn't answer. The silence was an answer. The Seelie Queen rose. "We should kill her now." "She came alone," said the King. "That deserves respect." "It deserves caution," the Queen hissed. "She is a splendor, a flame. She will burn both courts if we let her walk unchecked." "She will burn the pact," Liz said quietly. "Not the world. Unless you stand in its way." The 2 rulers stared at her. The Queen's expression cold and unreadable. The King's mouth curved, just slightly. "You remind me of her," he said. "Velisara. The way she stood here before the pact, demanding change, daring truth, offering us freedom." "She offered you choice," Liz corrected. "You chose chains." The Queen turned. "Enough. If we are to speak of alliance, it will come with terms." "Say them." The Seelie Queen raised a hand. An image formed in the mirror water between them. A fortress suspended between realms. The sanctum of the 5th chain. "You break this chain without us," she said, "and the rift will spill into the courts. Magic unchecked. Memory uncontained. We will drown in what we buried. Then help me, Lys said. The unseelie king stood now, stepping down from his throne, each footstep silent on the bridge. We will, under 3 conditions. She tensed. Name them. 1, he said, you do not break the 6th chain without our blessing. 2, the queen added, you reveal every name the mirror world gives back. No secrets. And 3, the king said, his voice lower now, if you reach the unseen throne, you do not sit. Lys said nothing. The wind howled across the chamber. Then, quietly, she said, I will agree to the 1st. I'll consider the 2nd. But the 3rd, never. The king grinned. The queen's crown trembled. And the pact between them shattered before it ever began. I will burn the lie, Lys said, stepping back toward the edge of the court. Even if you stand in the fire. And as she fell backward into the mirror beneath her feet, vanishing into reflection. The 5th chain stirred. Its voice deeper. Its weight heavier. And its guardian already waiting. Chapter 24, The Memory That Kills. The fall felt like forever. Not falling through air, falling through time. As Lys dropped backward through the mirror beneath the quartz, reality unspooled around her. Reflections bled into memory. Memory into prophecy. Every heartbeat echoed with the pulse of a world trying to remember itself. The deeper she fell, the more she felt it. The 5th chain's call, not like the 4th, which whispered. This howled. This chain was not a lock on a person or place. It was the anchor of the lie itself. She struck the ground with no sound, but the impact shattered light. The chamber she landed in was not a temple. It was a grave. Massive. Empty. Silent. No walls. No ceiling. Just a dome of black mirrors stretched infinitely in all directions, reflecting 1,000 versions of herself, watching. Waiting. In the center of the void stood a pedestal. On it, a mirror, covered in a dark shroud woven of hair, ash, and dried blood. Even before she stepped toward it, her lungs ached. Something about this place resisted breath. Not like a poison. Like grief. Kaelin had told her once that the 5th chain was the one no bloodline dared touch. Not because of power, but because of what it held. Lys stepped toward the shrouded mirror. The reflections around her whispered. Not words, names. Names she didn't know. Names she had forgotten. Names the world no longer remembered existed. She pulled the shroud from the mirror. The air collapsed. And the memory screamed. It wasn't a person bound to this chain. It was a truth. And truths, when chained too long, rot into monsters. The mirror flashed once. Then showed her. A city of light. Not a memory. A place that had once existed. A kingdom of scholars and dream carvers. People who spoke to time like it was a language. Velisara had been born here. It was called Eleron. She saw its towers. Its gates of breath metal. Its people. And then, she saw it burn. Not by flame. By erasure. She watched the pact-blooded convene. They hadn't just silenced Velisara. They had slaughtered her lineage. Destroyed Eleron. Burned the spells that held its name in the fabric of the world. Not because Eleron threatened them with war, but because Eleron threatened them with truth. Eleron remembered everything. So they made a deal. Erase the city. Erase the memory. Bind it in the 5th chain. And call it necessary. Lys fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face, silent and burning. The mirror pulsed again and showed her a final image. Velisara, standing at the city's edge, facing her people as the spell began to fall. She didn't run. She didn't weep. She carved a sigil into her skin with her own blood and spoke 3 words. Let it live. And in doing so, she hid Eleron in the mirror world. Not a copy. The memory. That's why the 5th chain was so heavy. It wasn't just a lock. It was genocide. Buried under the word balance. Lys rose slowly. She pressed her hand to the mirror and whispered, I remember. The 5th chain screamed. The world reeled. The mirror cracked from the center outward. Blood ran from the pedestal, not hers, but remembered blood, pouring into the glass. The sky above the void tore open. She saw Eleron's towers. Its people. Its light. And then, the spell broke. The city of memory surged up through the crack between worlds. And returned. Not in full, but enough. The truth was no longer buried. The pact's greatest sin had just been revealed. The court between felt it. The Thorkeepers felt it. The Crownless held. And Kaelin, far away, whispered, she did it. Lys collapsed into the reflection. The 5th chain gone. And as she drifted into unconsciousness, one word formed on her lips. Eleron. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the world remembered. Chapter 25, The Throne That Reflects. The world held its breath. Not just the lands of men, nor the shrouded courts, nor the silent chambers of Thorkeepers. The mirror world itself, the realm of reflection, of forgotten memory and fractured time, trembled with anticipation. The fifth chain was gone, and in its place, truth had risen. Not a weapon. A city. Eleron lived. And with it, the weight of what had been stolen. Lys lay at the threshold of the memory chamber, her body curled on the glass like an echo of herself, her hands still slick with remembered blood. The light of the mirror world shimmered around her in ribbons, swirling like wind drawn to fire. She did not dream. She remembered. All of it. Velisara's name, once erased, now carved into the fabric of the world again. Her city. Her sacrifice. The betrayal of the pact-blooded who had feared knowledge more than they feared war. She saw the spell that sealed the unseen throne, the spell Velisara had crafted not to rule, but to balance. A seat not of power, but of memory. A throne not to command, but to contain. And now it was awake. Kalen found her first. He didn't speak when he reached her, just sank to his knees and placed his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. She opened her eyes slowly, and for a long moment, said nothing. Then, "It's calling." He nodded. "The unseen throne. It's ready." "No," he said gently. "You are." They walked together. Not across land, but across memory. The mirror world opened its final gate for her, a bridge made of the 7 shattered chains, each link glowing faintly, connecting to a tower of impossible height. Floating in an expanse of void and light, the throne room lay beyond reach of time. At its center, the unseen throne. No gold. No obsidian. No crown. Just a seat carved from mirrored stone, flawless, faceless, timeless. As Lys stepped toward it, reflection stirred around her. Not people. Not visions. Possibilities. All the versions of herself that might have been. Lys the queen, cold-eyed and clad in mirror steel, ruling a world of fractured realms. Lys the tyrant, burning the courts to cinders for what they'd done. Lys the ghost, fading away to keep the world from breaking further. Lys the chained, bound by duty, always choosing others over herself. And finally, Velisara. Not a vision. Her. The woman whose name had been forgotten, whose magic now lived in Lys's every breath. "You don't have to sit," Velisara said softly. Lys turned. "But I can." "Yes. And if I do?" Velisara's eyes darkened with sorrow and pride. "Then you carry the mirror world forever. Every memory, every truth, every wound. You will no longer be merely a bearer of magic. You will be the reflection. The weight of every lie ever spoken will rest in your hands. You will never forget. And the world will never again be allowed to. And if I destroy it?" Velisara looked down. "Then truth dies again. And the lie is reborn. Perhaps gentler. But still false. Still fragile." Lys walked forward. The throne pulsed. Kalen stood at the edge of the chamber, silent, waiting. His chains were all but gone now, his presence more whole than ever. But she knew, if she sat, he would never follow. He had always been a guardian, not a king. This was her choice. Lys turned back to the throne. Her reflection did not meet her eyes. It bowed and smiled. She stepped onto the dais. The throne shimmered. The world quaked. The mirror world held its breath. Then Lys, Velisara reborn, sat. The mirror flared to life beneath her. Not with power. With memory. It surged through her, not like lightning, but like recognition. She didn't become a god. She became the truth. She saw every chain as it had been forged. Every lie as it had been told. Every scream silenced. Every city erased. Every pact sealed in blood and regret. She saw the Crownless staring up from his sanctuary of ruin. She saw the Sea Queen drop her crown in quiet defeat. She saw the Thornkeepers weep before mirrors that no longer lied. And then she saw herself. Not as ruler, not as queen, but as witness. And that was enough. The mirror world sealed. Not behind her. With her. Balanced. Alive. Whole. Kalen stepped forward, tears on his face. "You remembered." Lys rose from the throne. No crown on her head, no glory in her eyes. Just light. "I didn't come to rule," she said. "I came to make sure no one ever forgets again." And far below, in the waking world, Every mirror flickered. Every lie cracked. And the name Velisara was spoken aloud once more, by children, by fae, by witches, by warlocks, by all who had forgotten what truth felt like. They remembered. Because she did. And always would. Epilogue. The mirror never sleeps. Time passed, but the mirror world never again returned to silence. It shimmered now beneath the skin of reality, ever present, ever awake. No longer hidden, no longer chained. Reflections once muted now danced with echoes, memories half remembered, truths once whispered now shining through glass and water and steel. The veil between what was and what had been forgotten had thinned. Because Lys was still watching. In the years that followed the fall of the Pact, the world changed. Not with war, but with reckoning. The courts retreated. The Sea-like Queen dissolved her throne into stars. The unseelie king vanished into mist and returned only as rumor. The Thorkeepers burned their sanctums and cast their chains into the sea. Some called it an age of unraveling. Others called it rebirth. The city of Eleron rose again, not rebuilt by stone and hand, but by memory and magic. Its tower shimmered in twilight, visible only to those who carried the mark of reflection, to those who sought not power, but truth. And at the heart of that city, standing atop a hill of mirrored glass, stood a throne that no one dared approach. The unseen throne. Not guarded, not ruled. Just there. Empty. Because Lys did not stay. She walked the world. Quietly. Without banners. Without titles. Sometimes as a healer in broken towns. Sometimes as a shadow slipping through the halls of old pacts, gathering pieces of shattered history and returning them to those who needed them most. She no longer glowed. She no longer flared with power. She simply reflected. And those who met her briefly, unknowingly, said she had eyes like starlight and a voice like wine through old glass. And when she was gone, they often found themselves remembering things they had once believed forgotten. Names. Songs. Truths. One child, upon seeing her pass through their village, whispered to his grandmother. She looked like someone from a story, to which the grandmother smiled sadly and replied, "No, my love. She is the story. And the mirror, they say, never sleeps. Because now it remembers. Because now we do."
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.